Fucking hell, dude. Why? Why can't things ever just work smoothly? Show changes of emotional state? Things are gonna get a little dreadful if that's really the case. Okay. Welcome everybody to Wanderlust, Transsiberian. The only thing I know about this game is that it has something to do with trains. And, I don't know, I feel like after all the fucking hiccups today, I just want something that works. And even then, this stream just got fucking destroyed from this game starting out. So, hopefully that's the last hiccup that we have. I just want something to do something. I just need my mind on something right now. On a game that actually fucking works. Spill some sunflower oil. It took us a while to find the right place, but Vernon had insisted on doing it. In fact, he was determined to do everything that he could to be done in Moscow. And high on his list was spilling sunflower oil on the tram tracks on Malaya Bronya Yep, Patriarch's Pond. Yeah, why not? Let's find out what the hell the point of that is. It was something from his favorite book, one of the greatest library masterpieces of all time, The Master and Margarita. And when it came to books, it took a lot of effort to talk him out of anything. Why are you loud? Stop. Am I crazy? This game's really fucking loud, yeah? Maybe not. Even if the facts were against him. There were no trams on Malaya Bronya Street since the 1930s. It hurts my brain trying to figure out how to say Bronya. But he stubbornly spilled a bit of sunflower oil on the street anyway, as he dragged me through Moscow. We never found a severed head, but I almost expected to see one as we walked through the city. My brother-in-law excitedly pointing out locations from the book and regaling me with an endless stream of trivia. Comrades, talking black cats, Jesus, asylums, Pontius Pilate, trams, Satan, and, of course, severed heads filled our conversations as we made our way through the city. One day wasn't enough to see everything Vernon wanted to see, but we made what we could of it anyway. It wasn't what I'd expected from the trip. On the other hand, I wasn't sure what to expect. The two of us had never traveled together before, and I didn't travel much outside of work. I had my doubts. Meh. I was afraid that with Susan gone, things would be awkward between us, but it was okay. Vernon was the same old Vernon, and I was the same old me. Nothing had changed. Moscow was a dream. Stunning architecture, wide, impressive streets. Every metro station a masterpiece of marble and gold. I enjoyed everything. The fanciful topography of the unreadable signs, the bustling, beaming crowds, the golden domes of the Orthodox churches, the expensive cars that lined the streets. I could spend more time there. I was glad we were in Russia. This was my chance to see the country with my own eyes. No camera, no work assignments, and I had high hopes. Time would tell. But that was all the time we had for sightseeing. The next day we headed straight for the train station. Hey, let's fucking go, baby! Not causing trouble, not touching anything. Komsomolskaya Square contained for reasons I couldn't quite understand. 3 completely different railway stations. We headed towards the huge building marked Yaroslavsky Station. The square was full of life, and the station pumped a steady flow of people into it. Every person in every nook of the monumental building I cast my eyes on was a photo waiting to be taken, a story waiting to be told. Do you know that the Russian word for railway station comes from Baikal? Asked Vernon. The Tsar sent someone to copy the plans of a British train station, and they copied the name as well. And now every station in Russian is called a Vokzal. I laughed and shook my head. We need to get the tickets. Whoa. We'd make reservations long in advance, obviously, but we had no choice but to pick the tickets up at the station. Of course, deciding which tickets we needed 3 months in advance was a bit of a headache. We considered 2 routes. The shorter was only 6 days and 22 minutes long. Now, let's go for the longer route, bro. The longer one took almost a day more to complete. We chose the longer route. I still can't believe you made me pick this route, said Vernon, his voice as loud as always. He always said everything with a slight chuckle, but I couldn't tell if it was sincere. You could never be sure with Vernon. He was always the type of person who wouldn't show you they were upset, even if a landmine tore off their foot. What I could tell for sure, though, was that no matter what I'd chosen, he wouldn't have been satisfied. We'll regret this, you'll see. We'll tear each other apart in there. Well, it was certainly possible. We'll see, I sighed, trying to be diplomatic. The route wasn't the only issue. There was also the matter of which class we'd be traveling in. First class would allow us to have a compartment to ourselves. We'd have to share with 2 other passengers in second class. There was also a third class, or a platskartne, a huge sleeper car with no compartments. Just a few dozen passengers sleeping in rows. There was something exotic about the idea. Of course, my preference was clear. It's not though, because I don't know which one I want to pick. Let's not deal with people. I opted for first class. I didn't want to be bothered by other people all the time. And Vernon had just gotten out of the hospital. We could use some luxury. Vernon didn't agree with me, though. No, we need to see this country, he insisted. And the most important part of any country is its people. I want to meet as many of them as possible. Sorry, I knew, but it's got to be the Platzgartner. Fine. You're the one who just got out of the hospital, I sighed. If you feel up to it, I'm in. He smiled excitedly. When Vernon got an idea in his head, it was hard to talk him out of it. And the crazier the idea was, the more he liked it. If only Susan had been there. Susan was usually able to manage situations like this. She'd spent her whole life figuring out how to handle her brother. It had been almost a year since she left us. We'd been doing our best to get by without her. And now that the decisions have been made, and the tickets were in our hands, their weighty gilded card reassuringly luxurious, we only had to board the train. And so we did. Ooh. I love these things. I really want one of them. As we entered the train, each of us was given a teacup. No matter the class you were traveling in, it was your inalienable right to be equipped with one. I say teacup, but it was more of a glass in a metal holder. I know I want one of them. Mine was decorated with celebrations of Gagarin's space flight, and Vernon's with motifs of the 70th anniversary of October Revolution. Of the 70th anniversary of the October Revolution. Want to trade? He asked, looking at my cup, enthusiastic as ever. They didn't give a shit. Sure, why not? I said indifferently. They're just cups, you know. Vernon sighed, but the Gagarin glass had a special place on the small table next to our bunks for the rest of the journey. As we made our way into the car, we passed the boiler, which stood from floor to ceiling in a corner by the crew's compartment. I was expecting an ornate samovar to match the teacups, but it was just an ordinary boiler. The tea was divine, though. In the days to come, we'd be there with our teacups a lot, and with noodles, instant soups, or with packets of extra sweet Russian kisel. I don't know how to say that. Apart from the restaurant car, it was the only way to eat anything warm. We went to look for our seats. Everything will be alright. The Platzgartner was clean and seemed pleasant enough. It looked as though there would be enough space for everyone. It might prove to be a comfortable journey after all, I thought. See, no, it's not so bad, said Vernon. I guess it isn't. I guess it isn't, I answered, convinced that what was really the case. The car slowly filled with people, most arriving in groups. The first thing many of them did after getting to their seats was take out a bottle of vodka. It was going to be a fun journey. Ah, dear. Once again, I was blown by the sheer size of Moscow. Oh, it changed time. In the orange light of street lamps, the mad mosaic of monumental architecture, and post-communist blocks of flats looked as if it was burning. As we left the hum and glow of Moscow behind us, the world outside turned pitch black. The lights in the car were dimmed. I could see our distorted reflections in the glass. A darker me, a darker Vernon, a twisted version of the compartment. On one of the stations, the symbol of the city we were in caught my attention. A bear with an axe in its paw. Can you imagine? The train stopped at every station, even if just for a minute. People were coming and going, freight trains rumbling by. As I looked out the window, Vernon joined a group of sausage-eating, vodka-drinking travelers. So far, we'd gotten along pretty well. Then he decided that I shouldn't isolate myself so much and tried to pull me into the conversation. I didn't mean to miss that. In the short time that passed after we left Moscow, Vernon managed to make some new friends. I overheard him talking to a red-haired woman named Irina about her age. A place made of hair sat atop her head. A palace, wow, held mesmerizingly in place by bobby pins and hairspray. She also wore intense, colorful makeup that she touched up a few times with a deftness that left me in awe. The sluggish sway of the train was of no concern. Her hand was as steady as a sniper's as she put on her blood-red lipstick. I kept my distance, fuck that. I preferred to keep my distance, but it wasn't easy. When she realized that we were foreigners, she told us firmly that she'd take care of us, because we couldn't survive otherwise. And from that moment on, she told everyone that we didn't drink, and that we definitely didn't want more vodka. I was grateful. Both Vernon and I would have been wasted in no time if we joined even half of the people who invited us to drink with them. Irina seemed to enjoy the conversation with Vernon. People usually did. He was good with words, and his Russian was nearly perfect. Mine not so much, though. We'd be traveling to see how it is in this train, I said when she asked me in very slow, plain Russian why we were there. You don't have trains in Britain? Irina asked me in a wide smile. Our rail's not as long, I answered. This one the longest in the world. A legend. We want to... I paused, searching for a word. We want to experience the great Transsiberian railway, you know. Vernon finished for me. And I was sure I saw amusement in his eyes. He loved showing off his language skills. We both read a lot about it. We both liked trains, and we both really needed a trip, didn't we, Henry? Our ear much stress, I explained. Need vacation. Not to mention the amount of time Vernon had spent recovering last year. But Irina didn't need to know about that. At least that's what I thought. Maybe she did. I was in an accident last year, said Vernon. I got out of a hospital 3 months ago, and I convinced my brother-in-law to come on a trip through Russia with me. So we are entertainment for you. Irina looked at me from under her heavy eyelashes. You're on a safari and we're the wild beasts. It's not like that, Vernon exclaimed. I tried to explain. Being here, important. I tried to explain more with the tone of my voice than actual words. She looked at me skeptically. We want to meet people to be part of all this. Vernon gestured, showing her the train, I guess. Not just to witness it. We went on. Time is a funny thing. Sometimes it flies, sometimes it slows. At least that's how I felt on that train. Something was happening in the Platzgartney all the time. People were coming and going, new friendships were being formed, and vodka was being poured into glasses. The stories were getting more and more personal. It never ceased to amaze me how people open up in front of strangers just because alcohol had lowered their inhibitions. "My cousin has HIV, you know," said Irina at some point. "She got it from a transfusion after she was in an accident." "Don't you test the blood donors?" asked Vernon, taken aback. She shrugged. Vernon was very open, and soon enough a crowd was around us, talking and drinking. Even Irina loosened up and let him have one. I cleared my throat. I must go down to the seas again. I also decided to share a story. "I tell you about Vernon," I said. He was always the soul of our family. "We have that story when we go to sea," I started. "I'm still proud of myself for that one," Vernon chuckled. "Yeah, so in 90s we go to Brighton. Me, my wife, our daughter, Henriette, and Vernon." "He named his daughter after himself," murmured Vernon to Irina. She snickered. I laughed. I laughed and he joined me. "Brighton over the sea. He wanted to go on motorboat, the daughter too, but she was little and energetic. We were afraid to fall to water or be bored and cry on the boat. So we say no and stay on the shore. But they weren't my parents, so I took the boat," added Vernon with a grin. "You know what happens," I smiled. Half an hour later, we see Harriet is gone. We start looking. We go to the lifeguard and we alarm people. I am worried, thinking about going to police. I scream at everyone. "Even now, I wish I'd been there to see it," Vernon commented. So, an hour and a half later, we ready to go to police, and lifeguard says, "Is this your child?" We turn around. And there's Vernon. He smiled. Henriette runs behind him, very happy. "Mom, Dad, Uncle Vernon take me to see. It was awesome," she said. She still loves the sea. She sails all the time. And she always says it's because of her uncle, said Vernon, very proud of himself. I hated speaking Russian. It was like being a preschooler all over again. "My daughter," said the man who decided to sit next to Irina an hour earlier, "was supposed to go to university in Moscow last year. But when she got back from a vacation with her mother, she told me she was going to some school in another part of the country. Now she only comes back for a few days a year." But neither Vernon nor I say anything about our car accident, but it was hard not to think about it. There's a longer stop in Kirov. Praise be to the rooster. Ooh. Every time we stopped, I thought about a wave crashing on the shore. The steady rumble of the train was replaced by the murmur of voices, the sound of luggage being removed or placed onto racks, the bustle of passengers getting on and off the train, the disarray of something that was supposed to move but had suddenly stopped. In Kirov, I left the train with that wave, curious as to what I'd find on shore. I looked around. It wasn't our first stop, so I had a pretty good grasp of what to expect. Chaos. Vendors were always waiting for the train with everything a traveler might need at their stalls, from toothbrushes to alcohol, and the myriad goods on sale, and the loud voices of haggling people. The smell of beer and all kinds of food, from candy to sauerkraut to smoked fish, it was intoxicating. Someone caught my eye. In all the commotion, I noticed an elderly woman standing among the crowds like a rock. A rock that was guarding bowls of tasty-looking dumplings. When she brushed the hair from her face, I noticed that her right thumb was missing. Dumplings. Uh-oh. I raised my camera up and took the shot. She looked right at me angrily and lifted her hand to hide her face. She yelled something at me. I apologized. Sorry, don't want to upset. I showed her the photo. It's beautiful, I said. Can I keep it? She sighed. You can, but go away, I have to work. I nodded and went back to the car. I realized how rarely I asked for consent when I took photos. During conflicts, there was no time for it. And when I did fashion, consent was obvious. I rarely did street photography. Maybe that's why I didn't think about it. Or maybe I thought about Russia as a war zone. So Henry, asked Irina after the train started moving again, how's the safari going? Not bad. He shot someone, said Vernon without skipping a beat. Time to go. Soon we left Kirov and the thumbless woman behind. Let's buy souvenirs. We returned to passing endless fields and the lone slim birches. The soft rumble of the train assured us that everything was just as it was supposed to be. Another station. By God, they're real. 10 ruble bills. Shouldn't you buy something for Matthew? Vernon asked at some point. Alright. Matthew was my son-in-law. He liked funny, absurd souvenirs, and I tried to remember to get him something when I was traveling. But to be honest, it was usually Susan who reminded me about it. I got it. I got it covered, I said, ready to improvise. At the next station, I left the train and approached one of those stalls on the platform. There were all kinds of things there. Fur shoes, hats with ear flaps, iron tea holders, vintage Soviet enamel pins, cups, cutleries, old lamps, and, of course, Matryoshka dolls. Enamel pin. I bought the Kremlin tea holder. They're really cool. I want myself. I decided to get him a tea holder with the Kremlin on it. It looked pompous, but also nice in a way. Oh, he'll love it, Vernon grinned, looking at my trophy when I returned to the train. After the novelty wore off, After Vernon had told all his stories, after I'd gotten used to the unfamiliar alphabet and the flow of ever-changing faces that were somehow so familiar, the reality sank in that our journey would be more like endless jet lag than some thrilling adventure. You could sleep there, obviously, and the beds were even comfortable, but somehow it was impossible to sleep for long, even when the lights dimmed for the night. The soft rumble of the tracks, which had been so relaxing at first, now woke me up every hour or so. I remembered reading somewhere that the city used to be called Molotov for some time, like the cocktail. All in all, getting some rest proved to be difficult. I opened my eyes. Black magic in its exposé. Someone was standing over my bed, lean, tall, dressed in black, motionless. Well, sure, they were looking at me, even though I couldn't see their eyes. I sat up suddenly. "Ah, you're awake," the figure said in Russian. They had a strange accent. "Come with me." "Where are the others?" I asked. "Waiting for you. They're all waiting. You're late." We went to the restaurant car. The train was a maze of marble corridors and narrow stairways. My guide walked extremely fast, but I knew that I could lose him, or I'd never leave that place. I tried to remember the way. I need to focus. My memory was still alright, after all, especially when it came to buildings and corridors. Finally, we got to the restaurant car. It was a huge ballroom filled with people I didn't recognize. There was a stunning redhead sitting by one of the tables, eating a chicken. She was stark naked, and the chicken was still alive. She noticed me staring. "I see that you love Russia, don't you, my dear?" She made a wide gesture with a knife. Russia. I was not sure what to answer. My first contact with Russia was full of colors and strange wonders, and easy to enjoy. Mainly thanks to Vernon's efforts. Since we boarded the train, I'd been trying to see as many new things as I could from the window. It was hard for me to stop being a reporter and just enjoy myself, ignoring all the controversial topics. Russia. I opened a bit. I was still surprised that I told some strangers my family story. It was so unlike me. Maybe using Russian made it easier? I was so focused on the language that I didn't notice how much I'd opened up. Photos. I browsed through the photos I'd taken. The woman selling dumplings was a good one. I couldn't stop working, could I? I snapped out my reverie. What was the question again? How did I feel about Russia? I think I liked being there. From the very beginning, I'd been in awe, and the journey gave me only more reasons to feel that way. The people we'd met were open and honest in their emotions, the views, the tastes, and sounds fresh. I turned to the stranger. Suddenly, I was alone. On the walls were my photographs. All I could see were the angry faces of people I'd never met. I opened my eyes. The dream left me uncertain and strangely numb. There was something calming about the train at night. I checked my camera. The portrait I'd taken in Kirov looked just like I remembered. The last Tsar was executed in the city, did you know? Whispered Irina, with morbid fascination. I took a photo of my revolutionary glass to kill time. Can't you stop working for a second? Vernon sighed. The sound of the shutter stirring him stirred him from his sleep. Look, you're a Russian literature professor who's spending his vacations on the Transsiberian Railway. He just rolled his eyes. Bored by the constant rumble of wheels, I caved in and started eavesdropping on other passengers. They all talked about politics a lot. Putin was in charge for, what, 10 years? And it seemed to me that the man was still a puzzle. I'd heard so many contradictory opinions. You mean Putin no shit, said a woman to her companion. He's a humanist and a liberal, he answered, visibly upset. Time in the train was like a bubble. All the cars and stations ran on Moscow time, regardless of the local time zones. It was funny how time zones were a relatively new thing, and yet life without them seems unimaginable. I looked at Irina fixing her hair. I could happily watch her for hours. Omsk. Once a wooden fort built by Cossacks protecting the Russian frontier, now a sprawling metropolis with half a dozen universities. At least that's what Vernon told me. A half moon hung in the sky, shining bright. For a while I watched the clouds silhouetted by its radiance, hypnotized by their changing shapes and their stark contrast with the night sky. Sometimes it struck me just how huge a project that railway system had been. They had to create the whole infrastructure spanning 2 continents to make it possible. And there we were, me, Vernon, and Irina, sitting peacefully through the journey. I realized we were in the middle of Siberia. The city was so detested by the procurator. Did you know, Vernon said, looking thoughtfully out of the window, that this city owes its existence to the Transsiberian Railway? I also looked out the window. We saw a good portion of the city before we got to the station. It was quite big, especially compared to the other places we'd passed through. Figures, I murmured. They founded it just to build a bridge across the Ob. The river we crossed, Vernon continued. And now, it's the biggest city in Siberia. We had an hour-long stop in the biggest city in Siberia, so I thought I might as well do something with it. Thanks, Vernon, to go with me. Want to see the station? I asked, sure that he'd jump at the opportunity. I think I'll get some sleep, he said. Odd. A lot of people left the train with me, but after a few minutes, they'd all moved on and I was alone in an enormous station. I stopped outside for a minute to see the building, trying to see the resemblance to the steam engine Vernon had told me it was famous for. I went inside. Inside there were marble floors, crystal chandeliers, lights and arched ceilings. Everything was polished and gleaming, and there was something eternal about it. The floor reflected the silhouettes of the travelers as they walked across it. There weren't many of them now, just a few dozen unfortunate souls condemned to traveling through the night. I thought about Susan. Susan would have loved it here. She'd have asked Vernon to tell her more about the place, and he'd have gladly obliged. They were both very curious about the world. He definitely ran in the family. Maybe that was why Vernon hadn't come with me. Sometimes when we were together, her absence was too pronounced. I felt okay alone. I strolled through the station. There was something in that moment, at that particular station that made me fond of it all. The notion of travel, perhaps. The feeling that I was really in Siberia. That I was sharing my lot with other travelers, and I'd soon had enough. As I got back on the train, I realized that I was glad Vernon was there, and I wasn't alone. The train set off into the night. I thought about Susan for a while. A year had passed since her death, and the pain was beginning to fade. I was glad I still had my memories of her. The sun blinded me for a moment. It was dawn, and everything shone like the interior of Novosibirsk station. Novosibirsk. Irina was talking on the phone. She did that a lot. Sometimes gossiping, sometimes laughing with tears in her eyes, sometimes just listening or comforting. She seemed to have a lot of friends. And I was hungry. The incident at Griboyedov. It's so green. After days of eating instant noodles and the street food that was available on the platforms, which was tasty, but soon lost its charm. The restaurant car was a pleasant surprise. It seemed more spacious than the other places on the train. I felt myself straighten up even though I didn't think I'd been slouching before. Irina smiled. Ah, the smell of normal food. I've missed it so much. There was definitely the smell of cabbage and onion. It wasn't the most elegant smell, but there was something familiar and hospitable about it. I looked at the menu. The menu was in English, which was a relief. There were a lot of items on the menu, but when we asked, it turned out that most of them weren't available. I asked the waitress for a recommendation. The waitress knew some English, so I could finally speak like a normal human being. She recommended the two most expensive dishes on the menu. Schnitzel and something that was described only as meat mix in English. You mean pashtet? Yeah, solyanka, a different thing. In Russian it was called solyanka, which I was almost sure meant something salty. Yes, salty meat. Sure, why not? The solyanka was a fatty, salty, sour soup with lots of ingredients. Ooh. It's a different meat mix. Most of which were vegetables. There was sour cream, pickled cucumbers, olives for some reason, and lots of meat. The bowls we got were full. The soup kept spilling when the train took a turn or the tracks were too bumpy. I grabbed my spoon. In the end, I really liked it. I'd have asked for the recipe, but I had no idea where to find the right sour cream in London. In a Polish shop, perhaps. We had to wait for the main course. While we waited for the main course, we noticed two men, slightly older than us, at the table next to ours. From what I gathered, They were talking about philosophy and politics. Judging by the look on Vernon's face, the discussion was interesting. It seemed fun. Should we join in? I asked under my breath. Vernon grinned. Absolutely. They talked about God and duty and Russia, but it was hard to keep up with them. At least it was hard for me. Vernon rustled and laughed and nodded as if he were a native. Let's not. I just let them talk. I zoned out and just let them have their strange, esoteric, political discussion. It's about being a part of something bigger than you. About representing it with dignity. About giving it to others and growing bigger. About unity, said one of the men at some point. That piqued my interest. Great Britain was great empire all over the world. Not went well in the end. The topic stretched the limits about my Russian. You were thinking too small and give your subjects nothing, one of the men shrugged. But empires are the only way for nations and cultures to survive. That's stupid. Whoa! I didn't mean to say it's stupid. Worse, it was dangerous. But could I say that in Russian? I had no idea where to start. One of the older men raised an eyebrow. No, that's valuable input. Henry isn't an expert. Vernon smiled apologetically. And his Russian isn't very good. The man nodded, looking at me skeptically, and once again, I was cut out of the conversation. Oh no. I just waited for them to finish. They talked for at least another half an hour, while I pondered how Putin seemed to have been giving people exactly what they wanted. An illusion of being part of something big. An empire rising from the smoldering ashes of the fallen Soviet Union. We went back to our compartment. I shouldn't talk about these things when I don't even know how to speak properly. That makes diffusing situations very difficult. And we don't belong here. Looking out of the window at cows wandering without purpose and without a human to watch them, I thought we weren't so different. Wandering about, looking for purpose. We met the men we'd been talking to a few more times near the boiler. They were pleasant enough. We spent most of our time with Irina, though, and she didn't like them very much. Why was it getting dark already? I looked at my watch. Yeah, 4 p.m. in Moscow. About 9-ish here in Krasnoyarsk. After a while, everything went back to normal, fading into the rumbling of the tracks. The train went on and on and on. I was starting to regret choosing the longer route. A week on the train traveling across a whole continent. It all sounded very romantic. But after a while, there was a monotony to everything we did. Sometimes I felt like it was the only thing that was certain. The only thing left in the world. You got food. Rumbling. The everlasting murmur of voices. Yet another station. Ooh. At one of the stations, we spent some time on the platform with Irina. It was one of the smaller platforms we'd stopped at, but even so, there were a handful of stalls, and a bustling crowd of people had flocked to them. There was a long line of people next to one of them. Irina looked at it with disdain. What is it? What? She sighed, rolling her eyes. I'll never understand how people can eat that. We looked at her, puzzled. It's shibariki, she explained. I don't really approve of deep-fried food or meat. I know it's popular, but ugh. I don't know how I feel about that either, honestly. Yeah, well, it's past. When we stood in the line, Vernon looked at the huge deep-fried pastries. You know what would be unfortunate, he asked? Getting diarrhea on the Transsiberian Railway. It most certainly would, I agreed. And we left the line. When we were through with the chiburaki, the train was preparing to depart. Irina ran to the railway worker and shouted at her until we managed to get on board. I'm eating popcorn. Oh, gross. The smell of unwashed bodies. There was no shower on the train. Small talk with Irina. Finding excuses not to drink. We stopped at Irkutsk. The duel between the professor and the poet. After 3 days on our great Transsiberian journey, we were dying of boredom. Vernon, of course, couldn't stop rubbing my face on the fact that he'd opted for the shorter route. I didn't think 20 hours would make such a big difference, especially at that stage of the journey, but it did. The train stays here for half an hour. We could leave the station at least, maybe go to a normal shop, buy something to eat. I don't think that's enough time, though. How far would we be going, though? We'd be walking, yeah? Yeah, sure, why not? I said. Anything that could break the monotony seemed worthwhile. Let's make this quick. Let's go, I said. And we hurried off the train. Oh no. It was afternoon in Irkutsk. I reset my watch. The supermarket was a pleasant, bright place. There was a Russian pop ballad playing from the store's speakers. And if you didn't count the alphabet, I still couldn't get used to it. It looked like most of the supermarkets I was used to at home. The mall was reasonably well stocked, and the prices were better out there on the platform. We bought some things that would help pass the time. Let's get a book. Judging by the cover, it was some sci-fi novel about people living in Moscow's metro. Maybe my Russian would improve if I read a bit. Each of us bought what they needed, and we went on our way. Oh my, Jesus Christ, excuse me. Everything was going according to plan, and Vernon threw me a "see, I told you so" look. But a few seconds later, I realized that he'd slowed down a lot. I stopped. "Vernon, you coming?" I asked, stopping. "What does it look like I'm doing?" he spat angrily. Irina looked at us. "Is everything okay?" "Yes," answered Vernon. I could see that he was trying to go a little faster, but he winced in pain. I tried to help him. "Come on, let me give you a hand." "Will you stop it?" Vernon snapped, barely controlling his anger. "I'm fine." We went on, but we were getting slower and slower. Irina was getting nervous, looking at us, then in the direction of the station, and then back at us again. I told her to go. Calm, sad. "Go to train," I said. "No sense here." She nodded. "I'll try to convince them to wait," she promised. I looked at her running down the street, and then I turned to Vernon. "Now can I help? Now can I help you?" He gave me a grim look. "God, I hate you sometimes." "Yes, please, if you'd be so kind." So I helped him. We slowly made our way to the platform. The appearance of the hero. When we got there, the train was, of course, nowhere to be seen. The vendor were gathering their things, and the place was getting emptier and quieter by the minute. We didn't see her at first, and it was Vernon who noticed the familiar face. Irina was standing there, in the middle of all the commotion, surrounded by our luggage. She had an unsure expression that didn't fit her at all. "I'd have felt awful if I'd left you there," she said. "My friend lives not far from here. We can sleep at his place and think about what to do next." I wasn't fond of the idea of staying at some random person's house. We were in a big city. There had to be a hotel nearby, or 20. Vernon suddenly sprung to life, and they both started talking in Russian so fast that I couldn't understand a word. Before I managed to say something, Irina's friend was on the way, and all that there was left for us to do was wait. Vernon opened a bottle of vodka he'd bought at the mall. Why not? I drank with them. What else was there to do? The kitty cat! Irina said that it would take her friend some time to get to Irkutsk, so we decided to take a walk. I looked around. At first glance, Irkutsk looked as though someone had taken it out of the 70s or 80s. With its old, blocky cars and cracked sidewalks. The more you looked, though, the more quirks you noticed. There were speakers on the streetlights playing the old US hits by Presley, Sinatra, and Lennon, of all people. There were beautiful Orthodox churches and monuments to the Tsars. And there were, of course, wooden houses. They sure were something. Their windows were sometimes just a few centimeters above the ground. But the wood carving was something else. Delicate and ornate. Even on the oldest, most neglected of buildings. They made me think about the patterns Frost makes on windows, and the fairy tales Henriette used to love when she was a little girl. Chorus. I reached for my camera. The houses stood in such stark contrast to the rest of the city. Intricate wooden relics against the backdrop of brutalist concrete. It's all about the permafrost, said Vernon, looking at the buildings wistfully. When it gets warmer, the ground becomes softer, and the buildings sink a bit. After more than 100 years, though, well, he gestured towards the nearest building. The windows were just above the ground. You can see the difference. You really are serious about this safari thing, aren't you? Murmured Irina under her breath. Come, Ivan should be here soon. About an hour or two later, a big old military-looking pickup showed up. We went on our way. There were no back seats in the car, only two wooden footstools between huge bags and undivided contents. Irina's friend Ivan turned out to be an enthusiastic guy in his 40s. He smelled faintly of alcohol. His Russian was simple enough for me to understand, and soon I found out that we were going to Listvianka, a small village on the shore of Lake Baikal. After a while, I withdrew from the conversation, watching the sun set over the Siberian plains. They looked deceptively peaceful. Vernon was chatting with Irina and Ivan about our trip. When Henry left the station in Novosibirsk, I was sure he wouldn't make it back, he said. We spent a good 20 minutes deciding what to do if he didn't come back, didn't we, Irina? Ivan nodded and asked polite questions from time to time. Baikal. Listvianko is a small tourist village with maybe 20 houses. The streetlights didn't work, but thanks to that, I managed to catch a glimpse of Lake Baikal, between the houses before we got to Ivan's. The lake looked peaceful under the night sky. We went inside. The house was small, a bit too small for 5 people. It would be Ivan, his cousin, and the 3 of us. They decided that we'd spend the night in Ivan's room. All I wanted was to go to sleep, get to Irkutsk the next day, and get this all over with one way or another. But of course, neither Vernon nor Irina nor our hosts agreed with me. We were invited to the table. You must be starving, said Ivan's cousin Sasha. Sit in the kitchen, we'll get you something. The kitchen was a strange, narrow space. More of a corridor than an actual room. On the shelves, I saw lots of spices in the old jars with handwritten labels in blue ink. Most of the text was faded. Sasha and Ivan took out some plates and made us salami sandwiches. They also dusted some old glasses that they proceeded to fill with vodka. Nah. I shook my head. No, please, I said, shaking my head. Sasha took back the bottle, disappointed. It was strange how familiar we all were with each other. 5 people connected by coincidence. Sasha, Ivan, Irina, and Vernon got along swimmingly, talking faster and faster, and from time to time, they tried to accommodate me and pull me into the conversation. "They are brothers," said Irina at one point, gesturing toward me and Vernon. "In law," I explained. "And you have that story about the sea. It's a good one. Won't you tell it again?" "Yeah, why not?" "Yeah, I can tell you many about Vernon," I started. He has balls. "To the lonely sea in the sky. Back in the 90s, we go over the sea. Me, my wife, daughter, and him. We want to go to sea, take motorboat. It's windy and stormy. We say no. He goes by himself. We stay on the beach. It gets darker and starts to rain, we realize that we don't see our daughter. We started to look for her, and after a while panic. No one was in water, and Henriette wasn't with our... We go to lifeguard. We ready to go to police. And then we hear, "Mom, Dad!" And it's Henriette with Vernon. He'd taken her with him. He took her on the motorboat when we didn't let her. He could see what we didn't see. That the sea was her true passion. She still loves sailing now. She is a fantastic sailor, Vernon grinned. And I started it. The girl had an adventure, said Ivan. You foreigners are always so worried about everything. Kids have to live their lives. She was 8, I added, but he didn't see the problem. The evening went on. At one point, all I wanted was to go to sleep. I was about to excuse myself when Ivan's phone rang. He picked up, and then there were some fast-spoken Russian words I couldn't catch in my exhaustion. My friend is having a party. Maybe we'll go, he said, looking at Vernon and me. But more at Vernon. Sure, said Vernon enthusiastically the instant I started to refuse. We paused. We looked at each other. I was too exhausted to start exploring Russia by night. But if Vernon wanted to go... If I hadn't been so tired... Go by yourself, I said, wishing I weren't so tired. I am falling asleep as we speak. Oh, come on, Vernon's eyes were glistening. It'll be fun. I know. Go and have fun, I yawned. Drink one for me. They left surprisingly quickly, especially for people who were leaving a stranger at the home. Apparently, though, I wasn't threatening. They showed me to my room, and 5 minutes later they were gone. I went to sleep. The bed smelled faintly of sweat. The day without peace. It was late morning when I woke up. The house was silent and I was alone in the bedroom. It was the first time I'd really looked at the room. And judging by its appearance, Ivan was an interesting man. There were a lot of books there, but also rows of plastic figurines on the shelves. Most of them must have been more than 20 years old. I wondered why he collected them. I got up. Soon I discovered the house was empty. None of my 4 companions had returned from the party. I checked the time. It was almost 9. I might eat something. I rummaged through the kitchen and found some old bread and a few dry but surprisingly good sausages. I needed to think. I boiled some water and made myself a cup of strong black tea, and thought about what to do next. Let's call Vernon. You'd have thought there would at least be a message on my phone, but there were none, so I called him. And of course, there was no signal. His phone had probably died. I went outside. The car was still there. The village seemed peaceful, and I could see Lake Baikal behind the wooden buildings on the other side of the road. Hey, it's Wolfblade. I left the yard. The chilly Siberian air blew all over my face as I stepped outside the house. The world seemed brighter than usual, like it sometimes is on winter mornings. Shapes were sharper, colors more saturated, and I squinted. I was fed up with waiting. They'd been gone too long. Vernon was either in danger or being an asshole. If it was the former, I could get help in the nearest big city. If it was the latter, I'd had enough. I could get back to Irkutsk on my own, couldn't I? That would be shitty. No, I couldn't just leave Vernon alone. I decided to ask the neighbors. I went down the street and it didn't take long to find someone who could help me. The first person I saw, a slim man with a red face who could have been 20 or 60 years old. I couldn't tell. Asked me if he could help me with anything. My friend is gone. I can't find brother. He go out at night. He was shot. Alone? He went to party. Man who gave us sleep. A friend did party. Oh, a party. I know where he went. I can show you. Come. I went with him. The house he led me to was a relatively large wooden building that was roughly 5 minutes away. We walked along the asphalt road, then turned down a dirt lane. The village was silent, the sounds of our steps carrying ominously in the air. And the man said, "Here," pointing me towards a concrete house with brown windows. Their curtains were drawn. "They should be here." Could you come with me? Come with I? Sure, he said and went to knock on the door. After some time, the door opened. Behind it, there was a very tired man and apparently a good friend of the guy who had led me there. They exchanged a few sentences in Russian, and after that, I was let in. It was dark inside. Someone had drawn the heavy curtains. I heard snoring and could smell cheap tobacco, alcohol, and vomit. The host led me to the kitchen, and there asleep, with his head on the table, was Vernon. I sat down. I sat down under the table and decided to wait for him to wake up. Slowly, his eyes opened. Then, he burped. It took him a moment to concentrate on me, and when he did, he smiled drunkenly. Hey, it's good to see you. Vernon, we need to go. I tried to help him get up, but the stubborn old ass pushed my hand away. What are you on about? What's your problem, Henry? What's my problem? You disappeared without a trace. In a village next to the deepest lake in the world. Oh, come on, Henry. You know that it was gonna happen. I wasn't so sure of that. He left me alone. You left me alone. Have you ever been even remotely grasped the fucking meaning of responsibility? Uh-oh. Things escalated quickly from there. Says the man who left his host's house unattended and unlocked. Where would we be if I hadn't made friends with these people? I didn't, can I have a way out? This is ridiculous. You like talking, it's not a virtue. It's probably what got us here in the first place. Yeah, I can't. Can I please get out of the way of the situation? Well, if I'm the problem, maybe you should go back to Irkutsk on your own. Burin postured, suddenly very calm. This talk wasn't going anywhere. This conversation isn't going anywhere, Vernon, I decided. We were both too agitated to come to any kind of understanding. I'll see you later, I guess, and we left with that. No one's fate is of any interest. Long story short, I decided to go to Irkutsk on my own. Sometimes I had a short fuse. And there I was, in the middle of fucking Siberia. Next to a road that looked like it saw no more than 20 cars a day. I could try to hitchhike or go to the ferry pier. I vaguely remembered hearing that there was a train station on the other side of the river. What? What? Dang it. I didn't want it to do that. That's fairy. The cold wind blew in my face. Looking at Lake Baikal broke my heart. Beauty sometimes had that effect on me. And that day on that ferry, surrounded by the calm, blue water, adorned with the golden reflections of the sun, a deep sadness touched me. There weren't many of us on the ferry, about 10 people, 4 cars in total. 2 of the passengers, a man and a woman with Asian eyes, were talking in hushed voices as they looked at the lake. I couldn't understand a thing at this point. I was getting used to it. Maybe I never would understand the country that fascinated Vernon so much. Vizhyanka grew smaller and smaller in our wake. Vernon probably went back to sleep after I left. And for now, though, it was only me and the water. view. Suddenly I realized that there was a brightness surrounding us. The sky was the color of washed jeans. The lake was almost white. And the air between me and the mountains seemed radiant. I never would have seen that if I'd still been on the train. I closed my eyes, feeling the wind on my face and the deck under my feet, and the cold, clean air around me. At that moment, I completely understood Henriette and her love of the sea. There was only Lake Baikal and me. We were a bit like intruders here. The lake, the river, and the mountains looked so monumental there was no place for people and their small, unimportant issues and quarrels. Finally, I saw a destination. It wasn't very different from Listvianka, to be honest. But it didn't surprise me. It was a village in basically the same location, only on the other side of the river. There were a few houses huddled at the foot of a mountain and a small port. I thought that I saw some kind of movement, so I squinted. Then I took out my camera and zoomed in on the town. Yes, there was a train there, and it was just leaving. Port Baikal looked like someone had put it there by accident and then forgot about it. We were getting closer and closer. I wondered if I'd find a way out of Port Baikal. There had to be some kind of bus or train to Irkutsk. The couple I'd noticed earlier had stopped talking. Now they just looked at the lake in silence. The woman poured tea from an old thermos into an equally old cup for them to share. As we approached the pier, there was some commotion on the deck. People gathered their things and getting ready to go ashore. And we stopped. The end of the world. Port Baikal was a minuscule village wedged between the Angara River, Lake Baikal, and the steep surrounding mountains. I don't know how to say that right. I feel like I'm not pronouncing it right, and since I can't, well, I guess we're going with that. It was quiet and calm. Just being there felt soothing. The cars departed the ferry like slow, dazed beetles. There were a few people, passengers. The people greeted them, and who I assumed were some bored villagers. I saw a lighthouse nearby, and I knew that there was a train station somewhere nearby. I needed to find a way out. Soon I found the train station. The train station I'd seen from the ferry. I also found out that the next train was leaving in 2 days. It appeared that the tracks there had once been a part of the Transsiberian Railway. I couldn't fully understand why it had been separated from the main line. Later, I learned it was because they flooded part of the tracks to fill the Irkutsk hydroelectric station's reservoir. Chatting with the clerk, I heard the most unusual story. There was a time during the Soviet Union when they wanted to build a causeway across Lake Baikal, so that the trains wouldn't have had to circle around the lake. But Lake Baikal is deep, and you need thousands upon thousands of trucks of stone to make the causeway. Where would they get the stone? Where would they get the stone, you ask? There are mountains around the lake. You just have to blow them up. But how? But how would they do that? That's a good question. Luckily, Russia was a nuclear superpower. Yeah. They almost decided to drop millions of tons of radioactive rubble into the biggest freshwater reservoir in the world. At least that's what I've heard. I have no idea if the story was true. But it wasn't much help in the situation I found myself in. Just something to eat. Whoa. What the heck? Fish jerky? It was quiet and peaceful. Mesmerized by the lake and the nature around me, I almost missed the stall. I only noticed it when the woman who was running it shouted at me. Why don't you try an omuo? You can't eat them anywhere else. It almost sounded like a reproach. Why not? Yes, thank yourself. It was fat and smoky, delicate, and strangely appropriate for the time and place. If I had to imagine how a fish that only lived in Lake Baikal tasted, I probably would have imagined something like that. Rich, salty, and unique. I went back to the ferry. I returned to the beer. Let's go for a walk. I decided to take a walk across the rails to calm my thoughts. Maybe I wasn't exactly calm, but I felt lighter. There was so much space around me. Such a contrast with the confines of the train. It was as though I'd escaped from prison. I looked around, and it was a sunny day. And the deepest lake on the planet was shining as though there was a second sun hidden in its abyss. The mountains, the lake, the tracks. Everything seemed sharper than usual, like cut crystal. Compared to the train, everything was more alive here. I realized that I finally felt like I was traveling. That I'd reached a place that was far from home and unique. But I needed to get to Irkutsk. I returned to the pier. There's a cat outside meowing. Ah! This was a bit funny, I decided, looking at Port Baikal's shore. Anyway, here I was on the way back to Litvinka. The ferry driver looked at me, slightly surprised, but didn't comment. In the end, Port Baikal, shrinking on the horizon as we made the return journey, was a pleasant, if unnecessary, stop. I tried to decide what to do next. I'd probably have to hitchhike. I thought about looking for Vernon, but that was an absurd idea. Besides, he was the one who should be looking for me. Thinking about ways to get back to Irkutsk, I almost forgot where I was. Lake Baikal had a way of drawing your attention back to it, though. Lost in thoughts. Standing near the railings, I suddenly felt dizzy. The sky and the lake almost looked the same, and I couldn't tell the sound of the wind rushing past me from the hum of the engine. I felt as though I were flying, and here I was, in the middle of Russia, on my own. It was both scary and exciting. What a ride. What a ride, I thought, looking back at the past few days. The empty platform in Irkutsk, Ivan's car, the empty house in the morning. Vernon still drunk after the party. It all came back to me. It was not what I had in mind back in Moscow, but Russia turned out to be full of surprises. It was the first time that I spent so much time in the country, observing everyday life. Not just war or fashion or tourist attractions. Many things I saw were ugly, and some were beautiful. And some were funny, and some quite dark. I saw both wonder and grotesque. And I grew fond of the country. Why not? Somewhere along the way, I grew fond of Russia. To my surprise. The spontaneity of the people we'd met and their hospitality was hard to ignore. The landscapes were just breathtaking. I was far from sugarcoating the experience, but I enjoyed being here. It felt real. I let myself dissolve into the blue void. I blinked and looked around. There were 2 cars on the ferry. Both looked old, and one was hitched to a horse trailer. The drivers were peculiar people. One was an elderly man with one eye permanently squinted, and the other was, from what I gathered, a Buryat. He didn't talk much, and mostly busied himself with tending to his horse. I managed to catch a glimpse. It was a small, sturdy animal. When we got closer to Listvyanka, it started to get nervous, but the owner calmed it with a few gestures and softly spoken words in a language that couldn't have been Russian. Well, that was a waste of time, I thought to myself as I made my way back to the very empty road in Listvyanka. After maybe 15 minutes, I saw the first car. It looked old, but the owner clearly kept it in good shape. There was something reliable about it. I stood there for a good while, looking at the empty road. People there were quite helpful if you asked them, and sometimes even if you didn't. I thought about Irina and I, and despite the Vernon situation, I felt better. Finally, I heard an engine, and an old car pulled up beside me. Yeah, why not? We passed the wooden house of Lesbyanka and got out to Siberian plains. Yeah, why not? Me and my brother didn't agree in many things, I said at some point. We know we're family. We try to be better. It don't work. I pondered what our problem was exactly. I not talk with people well. I don't like them that much, I think. When we're on a trip, he talks. I prefer listen. That's selfish, commented my driver. You should share stories if you're going to take them from people. It's not about me. Vernon got better after accident. Year ago, my wife died. His sister, he injury. We decide trip. I stopped thinking about everything that had happened to lead me up to that point. When we was coming back from shop, his legs started to hurt. He late. I went help him. The train left us without us. That's unfortunate, commented my driver. We went sleep in Lesbyanka. My companion seemed surprised. Why? Vernon made a friend. To be honest, her unexpected kindness still surprised me. At night when they went party, I sleep. Morning, there is no Vernon. We fight, we split. Now, do you think you'll make amends? Asked the driver. Me so hopes. He's good man. The father nodded and started telling me about his daughters. In the back there were two kids, girls who looked about 5 and 7 years old. At first they were shy, but with time they were as loud as little girls can be. I didn't understand anything they said because it was all so fast. The engine was loud and their pronunciation wasn't the best. All I could tell is that one of them seemed upset. After some time, she started crying. Uh-oh. My fatigue is not looking good. And then, of course, she threw up everywhere. Oh, crap, what? Why? Stress throw up? Is that what happened? Throwing up from stress? Unexpected stop. Uh-oh. We stopped to clean up. I'm sorry, said my driver, jumping out of the car and rushing to help the girls out. She was crying and her clothes, shoes, and parts of the car were all covered in vomit. I thought her too. It happened all the time. He gave a little sigh and there was a bit of relief in it. Suddenly I realized something was missing. Or rather, someone. The second kid was nowhere to be seen. I tried to alarm the father. You're daughter, too. Yes, we both have daughters, he answered dismissively, trying to convince the girl to take off the vomit-covered t-shirt. I turned around looking for the girl. She wasn't in the car. She wasn't next to her father. There were a lot of places to hide. A ditch next to the road, a graveled road leading to some old house, and brown gold fields bathed in sunlight. I thought maybe she'd hid in the ditch, but it only found an old severed Barbie head with its hair cut short, an empty bottle, and an old shopping list. The girl wasn't in her seat, that was for sure, but maybe somewhere else. I thought I remembered hearing a loud thud around the time we got out of the car, but thought nothing of it. I checked the trunk. There she was, upset and angry. Where's my dad? Here, I answered, with sister. My answer seems to upset her even more. He's always thinking about her. He didn't even notice I was gone. I hate her. I tried to comfort her. I looked at the girl. Let's sing, why not? I sing in my language, I told her. She blinked and looked at me curiously. It was an improvement, so all that was left for me was to sing. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Always does the trick. She smiled and the father took care of his youngest. After some time, we're ready to go. He looked tired, but tried to keep the conversation going. Oh yeah? He told me a lot about his in-laws and his mother. According to him, the generation gap in Russia was too big to ever be bridged. You know, you can't talk to them. They just don't hear what we have to say. They're too Soviet. They'll never change. He looked at his daughters. Maybe it's cruel, he said quietly, but I try to keep them away from their grandparents. I don't want their minds tainted with Soviet poison. Near Irkutsk, he stopped for gas. The station was peculiar. A small building with a bulletproof window behind bars. My driver opened up a little drawer near the window, put money in it, and only then the gas pump started. He left me near the train station, insisting that he couldn't take my money because of the little accident on the way. Well, that was kind of him. Absolution and eternal refuge. The station hadn't changed much. The building was still huge, green, and intricate. The interior still reminded me of the 70s and 80s. There were some people there, but not as many as in Moscow or London. It wasn't hard to notice him, out of the corner of my eye. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a limping silhouette. Vernon. Somehow he ended up here, too. We met near the ticket office, and for a moment, neither of us knew what to say. So, I started. So. Vernon's voice was perfectly neutral, perhaps a bit anxious. I've been a bit of an ass. Sorry. That's an understatement. I looked at him and tried to put myself in his shoes. He slowly shook his head. Please stop trying to read me, he demanded calmly. Sometimes I felt like we had nothing in common, but Vernon knew me quite well. He gave me a crooked smile. Maybe you should focus on reading yourself instead. Because seriously, Henry, what the fuck was that all about? Why did you leave? It was a fair enough question. Why had I left him in Listvyanka? I didn't feel like I was there, you know? I tried to explain. The first week, I was like I was looking at this whole country through a window. Like I wasn't engaged, just passing by. Vernon smirked. Well, Henry, we were in a train. Sure, I admitted, but it doesn't change the fact that I felt distant. Maybe I left so I can get closer to what I was missing, so I could make this journey more real. He listened carefully, perhaps for the first time since we'd started the trip. I had hoped you'd stop working for once, he sighed. But you're always the reporter, aren't you? He craned his neck and looked at the timetable for a few moments without really reading it. And how did your deep dive into Russia work out for you? I'm happy I had the experience, but I came here with you. And that's what this journey is about. You think so? He stared at the timetable again. I don't think we're well suited to traveling together. Even if we aren't, that's something I'm willing to work on, I said. You have to work with what you've got, Vernon sighed. So what do we do? It was refreshing that we could solve things like adults for a change. Yeah, let's hitchhike together. I've actually grown fond of hitchhiking. Maybe we can do it together. Vernon paused, visibly baffled by my change of heart. Bloody hell, Henry. You're just full of surprises, aren't you? Well, come on then. What are we waiting for? It seemed that whatever had happened between us wasn't as devastating as it could have been. Who knows? Maybe it even strengthened our bond. So we gave it a try. The final adventures of Korolyub and Behemoth. We left the station, spent the night at a hotel, and the next day we took a bus to the outskirts of Irkutsk. From there we hitchhiked. Tulip. We're on the road again. I looked at Vernon, and I was glad to have my companion back. The sound of the engine filled the air. Everything will turn out all right in the end. When we started this trip, I had high hopes. Now, a few thousand miles long, I knew I was right from the very beginning. I think something changed when I was on that train. And for the better. I was beginning to understand what Vernon saw in Russia. The sheer size of it and the multitudes of cultures, faiths, and stories it contained were almost overwhelming. Maybe Vernon had been right in what he'd said to Irina at the beginning of our journey. Maybe we both needed this trip. Everyone in our family was a free spirit. We all needed distance to see what to do and what to think when life got complicated. These little pidgeys! My little pidgeys want to squish them. The world stretched out ahead of us, promising more dirt, gravel, and asphalt. More uncertainty. More hours spent sitting by the side of the road, and more awkward conversations. More cold nights and brisk days. The journey continued. It would be more demanding than we'd ever expected. Memory is a fragile thing, and maybe that's why we collect things. I wondered what part of Russia would stay with me after I finally came home. Souvenir. The book I bought in Irkutsk, and now finally had time to read. I looked at Vernon. Vernon was standing next to me looking at the road. You know what my favorite quote from The Master and Margarita is? He asked. How could I forget? He used to repeat it all the time. It was a line from the beginning of the book, close to the scene with the sunflower oil. In order to be in control, you have to have a definite plan for at least a reasonable period of time. So now, may I ask, can man be in control if he can't even draw up a plan for a ridiculously short period of time? Say, 1,000 years. And is moreover unable to ensure his own safety for even the next day. The end. Henry and Vernon, having managed to let bygones be bygones, continued their journey together. It was, perhaps, a beginning. Written by Marta Malinowska. Inspired by Transsiberian. Oh, it's not. Is it not actual? The titles were taken from The Master of Margarita. Oh. Wow. Ooh. You can continue the journey. In a bar on the world's most remote island, a group of strangers share their tales. Travel to the mysterious statues of Rapa Nui, the bustling streets of Bangkok, the pristine expanses of the Antarctic and the grasslands of the Serengeti, and more. Dive into tales created by passionate travelers and experienced reporters and discover the world they saw on their journeys. 4 novellas and 5 short stories, all inspired by true stories and set in real places await. There's more that I could probably get then. I wonder if starting a new story would literally start me in like a whole ass new story. Oh no, it's the same thing. Henry's story. Okay. Well. that's gonna be it for now. Thank you all so much for watching. I needed this after today's whole shabacle of random crap that happened. I hope you all enjoyed this game as much as I did. It was very nice and relaxing. With that being said, that is the end of this stream, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Hope you guys have a good day. Bye-bye.